Hello, everybody. Brian here from quantlabs.net on Monday, January 22nd. Last week, I just wanted to let you know I put up a video, or sorry, a posting on my blog called Death of Apple Starts Today. It was a week ago I put this up, and I had a big fiasco with Apple in terms of reporting a insecure app, actually two apps, Telegram and Google. It's been accused of both apps going against Apple or something or other. John McAfee said that it is the iPhones and the iPads are spy devices. I'm more than convinced that they are, and that's okay. But the problem is that how Apple handles it. So after a fiasco with a variety online with their supposed support advisor, surveys were filled out, called in both the store level and the head office level, because it was, to me, it was pretty serious and it really ticked me off in a lot of big way. But all they did was they just put me into the general support line that I already went through. So it comes back to Apple is asking me, the consumer, to pay $1,000 for their iPhone, yet which is a pretty premium price, and yet you get garbage service like they have now compared to a few years ago, which I was a very loyal Apple fanboy, and I was pretty happy about it because I trusted Apple and I love the Apple service of through the store network and whatever else. And I felt that I had a pretty good product, and I really liked Apple entirely in terms of software, the technology, and the hardware. And because of the service that I had a week ago, I said, screw it, screw Apple. I'm not paying any more premium product if I'm not going to get the service, and lost total confidence. And the end result of this ticket was, well, we acknowledged the ticket. We don't like to hear about it, but too bad. We won't tell you what the end result was. We won't tell you that we acknowledge that we do see security problems in those two apps, in the Google search as well as Telegram, and they seem to be okay with that. So it came down to that Monday, a week ago. I said, well, Death of Apple starts today. So a few days ago, I posted this article about Business Insider. Some little girl was whining about her retail phone experience with the latest phones. And I also put up a couple of articles on people's overview of Apple reviews, which are pretty well 1 out of 5, mostly. Very rare if it's a 5. And to be honest, it looks pretty bad because it's something to do with either the service of Apple on the latest phones, or there's battery replacement that they're already getting bad publicity on, just how they're handling it and pissing off people. And that's all fine and good. So I'm sworn off of Apple now, and let's talk about the solution. Because I'm a developer and I'm doing trading, what that comes down to is last Friday, I went in and created a video, which is ending. And the other Orwellian thing is with even Google. On Saturday, I was notified of a few services that Google does provide on two different things. One, where you can track your movement through the Apple, like where Google is tracking you through the search app. I guess in my case, it does track my basically where I'm at over the last 3-4 years. It was quite astonishing when you look at the map of, in my case, Southern Ontario, where I've been, and it's over the last, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. Pretty scary. The other one was in concerns of how Google is able to track all my keywords on searching on both YouTube and Google search. It was pretty scary. And every single day, every single key phrase, keyword I was searching on, that was tracked through Google. Am I surprised? No. But considering that all that data is sitting there on a server, that means that somebody that don't like me for whatever reason can just go and access all of that information. And it's really, when you hear about the NSA and how they're able to track your phone calls, your data is being tracked both at Google, Apple, Facebook, and we know about Microsoft as well. So as a result, it kind of like literally really hit home on the data that is being tracked and stored on Google servers and whatnot among pretty well everyone that uses Google, which is pretty well probably the world. So as a result, I'm not interested in iPhone. I'm not interested in Android. Not interested in any of these corporations and how they can track you. I think it's pretty, to me, my privacy is clearly breached. So as I said, what can we do about it? Well, a lot of my hardcore low-level developer friends are moving to Linux. I did a video, as I said, on Friday concerning uh, both. I was recommended for Linux was Fedora, which is a open source experimental distribution of Linux from Red Hat, which I really like. But you know, it's a commercial commercial Linux. So I wanted on my little Windows system just to experiment how and what Fedora will look like. Can I get my Dukas Copy J4X running on it? And I succeeded in that in pretty well short order using the latest version. I hear it's secure, Fedora, but here's the rub. When you want to go further than any distribution of Linux, because I've done my research, and I think I've posted them along here in these links. Just look for the term or title or phrase on my blog called "Hardening FreeBSD is better than Linux any day." So with that video, I created a Fedora installation on VMware workstations is what I had. And then I also at the same time created a FreeBSD, which is a BSD Berkeley software distribution, which is open source and free. And basically I tried that as well at the same time, which is more like a Unix-like. It's not really Linux-like, and the learning experience was pretty stark. And going through these links here, learning about the differences between Linux and FreeBSD. In my mind, when you're running on Linux, you're not 100% secure for a variety of reasons. With FreeBSD on default, it took me probably half an hour to figure out how to be able to SU from my default user to my root user. It took me a long time to figure that out, and I started picking up on the fact of how different between any Linux, Fedora, be it the other ones like Ubuntu and whatever else, and FreeBSD and the philosophy on its security level. And it's basically this line I like to use. I would call it paranoia lockdown. Now that may be extreme, but when you come from my experience over the last week regarding all the things I'm seeing what's tracked through Google, let alone Facebook or even Apple or whatnot, it comes back to the fact that I am, I guess, in my own mind, wanting to be paranoid, wanting to make sure that I have a secure, very locked down system. So as examples with the FreeBSD, the difference between Linux is, now again, I'm no expert in this, but from what I'm reading and understanding, there's a couple of defaults out of the gate that Linux has that still does not make it 100% or foolproof secure. So let's say with Linux, if you just go in and install, configure your installation on Linux with a default, you are allowing your system daemon to run, which is basically your daemon to allow others to log into your installation of that Linux box or configuration. With FreeBSD, I believe it's default no, that's not running. The other big thing is when you set up your root and all your user access through Linux, what happens is you're now enabling others to remote into that Linux configuration and use. Now I'm talking about where hackers, this is very important for hackers, they're able to log into your box by doing default SU and trying to log in, or maybe even SSH or whatnot, and be able to, by default, be able to hack in. with FreeBSD, that's all disabled. You cannot SU in. You have to have a file that gives approval for certain users that have the ability to log in remotely via SU. So you have to put that in a file called SU users. And there's all these little things that will make you pull your hair out because we all like to live in a world of convenience. But looking back on my experience with convenience versus secure and privacy, I would rather go in with a mindset using something like FreeBSD where it just assumes me to lock down everything, and then for me to heavily configure that installation to what I want and allow that FreeBSD box or configuration to have, or installation to have, and have access and allow whatever to remote in and access it. So I just wanted to talk to mention that as a default. Now, I did put up a 3-hour video on Friday night, or it's actually going up. It had some music on it, and it clearly violated when I put it up on YouTube, password protected as well. How with all these videos or audio files of music on there, I got over 8-hour or 3-hour video. I got something like 8 violations because of the music was embedded in the video and as part of the audio. And that just, let alone again using artificial intelligence, machine learning, on how Orwellian our society is becoming, where if we do something, we are out of the gate being watched and monitored to make sure we're not, violating these copyrights. Even though I just want maybe 3 people to watch it. So now I'm putting up a 3-hour video that's silent without any of these audio. So that video is going to be available only to my members, and that's really more of a kind of a joke video, but it will show you the challenges I went through trying to both configure Fedora and install Fedora and configure and install FreeBSD as well, which I kind of got working. My goal is just to get the JForks running on those installations, which I was able to. With the exception of FreeBSD, because it was just mentioning that it needs a specific version of the JVM, which I'm hoping you can easily install that particular JVM. So I'm assuming I can get JForks running on FreeBSD. I was able to install on FreeBSD the GNOME 3 GUI library with the Xorg or the Windows or the X Windows, as well. So I was able to get a complete GUI interface running on FreeBSD, but the apps, you don't get all the bloatware apps like you would with on the more popular Linux desktop distributions. So you have to actually install each one you want on your FreeBSD when you want to run the GUI on top of it. So there's some advantages there. It's just the problem is just understand if you're going to go down this path that I'm thinking, I think you got to be a very accomplished. I'm not saying I'm accomplished, but I've got 30 years of tech background to help me stumble my way to get through things, to get both a secure, like a very secure BSD environment running FreeBSD, and it seems to be pretty secure. I'm by no means a networking expert or security expert but learning about FreeBSD, it really got me learning quickly on the fly how to do that. And again, this blog here, hardening FreeBSD is better than Linux any day, which is on my blog. Those links are there, so you can refer to those. So learning about FreeBSD. The other big thing about FreeBSD, if you're going to go down that path, you got to be very technical on the software front, because you may resort to building maybe a lot of components from source. So you got to be very confident in not just the programming language, whatever you want to install, but you also got to be familiar with the configuration of Linux and Unix as well. So it's not like going to be really meant for any average person, because it is going to be a challenge, and I'm not going to go into teaching people that. That's just not where I want to go in terms of call it career or whatever. But just wanted to put that caveat out there. So it's quite interesting the society that we're moving into. Um, but unfortunately, call me paranoia, and it's good that this FreeBSD exists with this, where the security and privacy in that mindset is part of that mindset of the community that behind FreeBSD. And I'll gladly play along, knowing what I know about the world that we live in, where all these big tech companies now are tracking us and have the ability to. The other thing I want to stress is if you are planning to do things like cryptocurrency, let's say automated trading, machine learning, and all that, I think over time you'll quickly realize you will have to move into these type of environments like a FreeBSD, because a lot of people don't know, but with the tax situation of personal income tax, there seems to be countries are getting very desperate for cash. In Canada here, I was audited for 3 years in a row. I don't want to get into that, but I involved my member of parliament to get them to back down. And what happened was last year, we have our tax authority, the Canadian Revenue Agency, admitted a few months ago that they purposely blocked 50% of calls that were calling in when their assessments came back that they were expecting to pay another, in my case, $3,000 over the suggested what my software, which was Intuit, that said to pay, and I paid that, and then they wanted $3,000 more. It was like extortion. So when you called the CRA to query about it, you couldn't get through because it was the calls were busy, and that was the CRA was blocking the calls. So they admitted that, and they did that because they want to basically try to meet quote unquote targets. I personally think it's just basically the federal government at any country in the Western world, as well as local or provincial or maybe in the state level. A lot of them are running out of money, and I confirmed that in a Bloomberg report yesterday as the U.S. government, federal government's shut down, and a lot of states are running out of money. So we are now getting into desperate times. So where am I going with this? As people move into cryptocurrency, as people move into more private, anonymous cryptocurrencies, you get countries like Korea last week that said, yo, if you want to be trading in these exchanges in Korea, South Korea, you need to have the banks who are mandated to make sure that all customers that are involved in cryptocurrencies that link to their cryptocurrency exchanges, that they had to identify themselves in order to get the banking relationship. And that's now a law in South Korea. So now what's happening is, I just posted from this morning on how the South Korean government has now admitted, and now they're targeting the South Korean cryptocurrency exchanges to tax 25% on all the transactions on cryptocurrency. So now they're going after it on a tax level. So that clearly shows you they're either trying to shut down this big movement of cryptocurrency, or they're running out of money. Either way, it's a sign of desperation. And then last week, you may have missed that story, but there is stories about how both Germany and France are trying to potentially regulate cryptocurrency as well. So it's one thing to regulate it, which I'm totally against, obviously, but then there's also the fact of how they're trying to tax it, which I never thought would happen, but here they're trying to tax it, which is, again, a huge desperation. So where am I going with all this? Well, I think when we look at distributions of like FreeBSD, which again is open source and it's very private, I think people are going to be forced into using these kind of operating systems, so they can't be hacked in by, I don't know, government. Is this conspiracy theory? I don't know. But preventing from, let's just say, bad people from getting into your environment and being able to trade algorithmically, systematically through means of crypto or virtual worlds and be able to make money, but yet not be tracked by, let's say, tax authorities or government or whatever. I think those days will come and those days will hit us. And when you look at what Apple's done, what the cryptocurrencies world's going, blah blah blah, it's something that, in my mind, that I'm planning to do when I deploy this thing, to go on to FreeBSD and lock this sucker down. So, sorry to blab about it, but I think it's important to understand. Again, let me just go through this FreeBSD because I didn't talk about this. There's some kind of ingenious stuff in this FreeBSD. There's something called Firewall packet filtering, which you have. You have the zero file system, which is encrypted, and you hear about the government, like FBI and whoever else, whine about how these messenger services are encrypted. Well, now if you imagine what you're encrypting your file system, like they won't be able to track anything. And there's all these ways to randomly encrypt. It's mind-boggling. It's all new to me, but I find it quite interesting how the direction we are going technically on this, and there is a movement with what I'm mentioning here towards this, and it's all going to revolve around things like cryptocurrency, and me being forced into it. I'm investigating it, and I'm telling you, I'm not liking what I'm seeing in the present day, but hopefully this sort of FreeBSD will help life down the road for security and privacy, which I think we as citizens of the free world are entitled to. We shouldn't be automatically assumed to be criminals just because we want no longer be tracked by people like corporations and soon to be governments. So I just wanted to let you know about that with my experience with Apple, as well as some of the alternatives out there. But if you want my opinion, Linux is fine. But if you really want to go one step beyond in terms of in terms of deployment and where you run your production systems, I do think FreeBSD is a pretty good alternative, and you may want to look into it. So hopefully that'll help you out, and we'll talk to you soon. Later.